Herkese merhabalar.
Good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to our panel. This is the second edition of the EBRD Corporate Governance Workshop. Welcome, and thank you very much for joining us in this panel, indeed.
Language icon at the bottom of your Zoom client if you are preferring English. Bu video konferans sol köşede gösterildiği
This
üzere...
video conference is being recorded, as you can see. We'll have simultaneous translation in Turkish and English. You can choose the language that you wish in the button on the bottom of the screen. During the workshop, please keep yourselves muted and you can convey your questions via the chat panel. Unfortunately, we won't take your questions in video or in audio formats. If you need any technical assistance, please contact us in the chat panel. I'm one of the EBRD bankers, Burcu Islam. I'd like to wish you a successful panel, and I'll give the floor to Mr. Haluk. Mr. Haluk.
Evet, hoş geldiniz.
Welcome. Welcome to this beautiful meeting. It's a great pleasure for us to be with you in this meeting. The first speaker that we have with us is going to talk about the importance of this meeting. He is the EBRD Turkey President, Arvid Tugner. I'd like to give the floor to Arvid.
Thank you very much, Haluk Bey, and very warm welcome, and also thanks to all the participants of this event, and of course a very special thanks to all our speakers and experts, and to the organizers and my colleagues for putting this event together and also inviting me. I'm really very pleased to be here with you at our second corporate governance workshop for family businesses in Turkey. It is great to see that we can all still be connected in these difficult times, even if only remotely. Well, sometimes I think we are connecting more these days, which is certainly a very good thing. If you allow me to give you a very quick introduction to our institution, EBRD, for those who may not know us so well yet. EBRD in Turkey is really a major investor, and to date, the bank has invested almost 13 billion euro in the country through more than 300 projects, 95% of which are in the private sector. In 2020, we responded to the COVID-19 pandemic by stepping up our annual financing in Turkey to 1.7 billion euro. And I can promise you, we will continue to engage strongly in Turkey, as 2021, of course, will be a year during which the pandemic still plays a major role for all of us. The pandemic really has challenged the functioning of companies around the world, as well as in Turkey, of course. It has severely tested family businesses and the attributes that used to give them such a competitive edge. All companies now have to manage operational change, evolving consumer demand, new health and safety procedures, and a whole range of other issues. The ability to survive and thrive in this new normal is critical to the future of private businesses, their owners, as well as employees who, of course, rely on it. Professionalism, timely and well thought through decision-making have been key to overcome the crisis and risks that each business is facing. Therefore, we are excited to meet with you today to discuss advice and best practices from experts on some of the key issues of effective corporate governance. As a development bank, primarily focused on the private sector, we believe good corporate governance is the backbone that all companies need to strive for when organizing their business in a sustainable way. There are really many reasons why EBRD cares so deeply about corporate governance. One reason is very specific to EBRD. Good governance is at the heart of the EBRD's mandate, which is to foster transition of countries into well-functioning market economies. Good governance, including corporate governance, is in fact one of the characteristics of such functioning market economies. We are aligned here with many economists who consider good corporate governance as a factor also positively influencing individual business success. EBRD has a strong record of accomplishment in supporting corporate governance reforms in Turkey, and I want to give you briefly 3 examples of that work. We helped the Capital Markets Board of Turkey, CMB, to establish a monitoring framework for the implementation of the Turkish corporate governance principles for companies listed on Borsa Istanbul. This helped improve reporting by companies and also focus on their corporate governance practices by the CMB. We are also leading an initiative aiming to improve representation of women on Turkish corporate boards. Strong board diversity is shown to lead to more objective and active boards, greater participation in constructive discussions, and stronger management oversight. That is why we are working with many stakeholders in Turkey on the development of a roadmap for promoting gender diversity on boards. And a final example, actually many examples, is really that in our investments with private sector companies, we help many of our clients improve by developing corporate governance action plans that address their specific governance challenges. By working across multiple sectors and with all kinds of companies, from SMEs to companies that are already working on an IPO, our action plans help companies to align their governance with international best practices and also in support of their strategic plans and aspirations. Dear participants, the pandemic has forced us to rethink our values, our ways of doing business, and our recovery plans. You have seen and experienced its impact in Turkey firsthand. However, the pandemic has also given us an opportunity to think how to build back even better. This is why we are pleased to see so many strong Turkish corporates, many of who are connected today, and who clearly have a desire to improve and learn further. As EBRD, we want to be your partner on this journey and support and encourage family-owned companies to innovate and grow. Thank you very much for your attention, and I wish everyone a successful and insightful conference. Thank you.
Evet, çok teşekkürler.
Thank you very much for your speech, for your welcoming remarks. EBRD Corporate Governance Executive, he's basically the expert on this, Pavle Juric from EBRD, who'll have his welcoming remarks.
Thank you very much, Haluk Bey, and I hope everybody can hear me well. First of all, ladies and gentlemen, good afternoon, and it is a pleasure to welcome you to today's workshop on behalf of the EBRD's corporate governance team. The EBRD indeed does pay great attention to corporate governance of its clients, and I don't want to repeat what Mr. Türkner said, but when companies and countries where we invest thrive, then our economies also grow stronger. As investors, we want to ensure that the companies we work with make good strategic decisions and manage risks and challenges of their business effectively. This is why, when it comes to our own investments, we helped many of our clients, some of which are family-owned businesses, improve their corporate governance. In those cases, we cooperate with our investee companies to understand their plans, their needs and challenges, and propose concrete steps that should be taken to help the company towards sustainable growth. Family-owned companies have unique advantages: commitment, originality of their ideas, and closeness of key decision makers, and also their ability to leverage their own human capital for the benefit of the company. On the other hand, when assisting family businesses, we try to address many of the risks that are specific to them, such as misalignment of family and company goals, lack of clarity in roles and communication, and inadequate knowledge transfer and succession planning, so that the business can be taken forward by the next generation when the time comes. The COVID-19 pandemic has brought to the fore the failings of doing business as usual for many, and is perhaps the latest and loudest in a series of calls for more concerted effort for sustainable development. These trends are quickly permeating the investment world, and nowadays many financiers are starting to examine their investee companies' environmental, social, and governance, what we call ESG features. As the COVID crisis is still unfolding, recent studies suggest that companies that implement so-called ESG good practices have proved to be more resilient during these difficult times. I believe that family businesses can benefit greatly from the concepts of sustainable development and greater attention to ESG issues, because they are easily adaptable and they are more attuned to the communities in which they operate and have excellent knowledge of their value chains. However, work on these topics needs to start and needs to take place at the strategic level and should start sooner rather than later. This is another reason why corporate governance is crucial, even in family-owned companies. As Mr. Turkner rightly pointed out, it does form a backbone for all of the company's efforts, even in a family business. But how does one organize governance in a family business? Well, in a corporate governance in general, one size does not fit all. That is the case for large companies and is certainly true for family businesses. And that is why in our work, there is always the need to analyze the specific circumstances of the company, set a clear direction in which the owners want the company to go, and then try to address the gaps and pitfalls along that road. That is where the value of workshops like the one today comes from, as you will have the opportunity to hear about good practices in similar companies, share experiences, and reflect on what is relevant for the success of your business. I'm particularly pleased to see Haluk Bey at the helm of this workshop, as was the case with the previous one in 2019. I'm sure that the topics he prepared for today, along with our distinguished speakers, will be very useful to many of you in taking your businesses further. With that, ladies and gentlemen, I thank you very much for your attention, and I wish you a productive workshop filled with enlightening discussions. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Pavle. Değerli izleyicilerimiz, duyduğunuz gibi ana temamız bu toplantıda özellikle EBRD'nin de ricasıyla
Distinguished guests, based on EBRD's request, our main theme during this workshop is the interaction that was brought by COVID with positives and negatives. Of course, there are negatives, but you will see that there are positives to it as well. Corporate governance and corporatization and the strategic approach of families and the way families finance their companies, and the supply chains that are vital to them and some other vital areas, how they guide them. We would like to share some insights about these topics. Plus, we are going to listen to the young leaders of two important companies who accepted our offer, a request to be here, and in their own companies, they will tell us how they fight against COVID in their respective companies. Now, I'd like to go to our schedule, our agenda, without taking more of your time. Our goal here is to be strict about time until 5 p.m. to the extent possible. All of you, more or less, have 20 minutes of presentations. Our request from you is please I just noticed that there are people who cannot hear me according to what people say in the chat. So please, our technical colleagues, let's them give them help about this issue. We're going to read your questions through the chat, and maybe we won't have the chance to answer every question, but to the extent possible, we're going to try to answer your questions. And of course, you can also reach us through email and ask your questions. And in that case, we'll try to answer you with great pleasure. Now, I will try to share my screen, and I hope I can manage to do so. I believe you can see my screen. Is anybody nodding? Let me check. I see my own screen, but I believe you see it as well. These are our topics today. It's a full agenda. You know the speakers already, and they'll introduce themselves, or I'll introduce them briefly. But I'd like to start with the following. Family-owned businesses, family-run businesses have become more important during the crisis. We already knew that family business is very important, but we cannot stress it enough. Let me give you a couple very brief points about the significance of family-owned businesses. In the US, 57% of GNP is carried out by family-owned businesses. In other countries, for instance, the developing countries, which includes Turkey, among companies which have more than $1 billion in revenue, 70% of them are family-owned businesses. You may know these facts already, but what is the vital impact of it, especially together with the arrival of the pandemic? Family-owned businesses have proven themselves to the society, have had a chance to display how important they are, and also we had a chance to see that they're vulnerable and they need institutionalization in order to survive, and they may need support, as emphasized by the previous speakers. Now I'm going to run a short poll with you. I will now ask my colleagues to show us the first and second questions. The first question is, do you have a constitution in your family company that is acknowledged and signed by everyone? Probably we should give 1 to 2 minutes to receive all the answers. And then I have a second very short question. These questions are going to help us in planning the future, and they will help us in expressing how significant family-owned businesses are. The answer to the first question, I believe we've received all the answers. I've allowed half a minute. As you can see, it's more or less similar. As a person who's been involved in this for 20 years, if I asked 20 years ago, probably the answer would be around 5%. Let's ask the second question. Do you have a written? Okay, this was the first question. And now I go to the second question. Okay, I turn off the first question. Do you have a plan to transition to the next generation in written form? A written document that plans how you're going to transfer things to your successor. Do you have, for instance, approved by your executive board or your family council? Do you have strategic planning or any kind of plan or program in transitioning transferring things over to the next generation. Okay, let me share the answers, share the results with you. I believe you can see it now. Okay, so that means we still have a lot to do. We have still room to improve, and let's keep that in mind as we go along. According to recent research for the universities that I follow closely, or universities or other institutions, when it comes to when companies, family-owned companies have a constitution, they're more successful in transitioning to the next generation. COVID has brought us many negative impacts. According to a research conducted with 190 family-owned businesses from 5 different continents and 20 different countries, 90%, according to this survey, 90% say they were negatively hit by the pandemic. There are different ways that they were hit, but you can see details. But 5% were positively impacted, and 5% are almost bankrupt. We have lost those 5%. Okay, what are the global impacts of the pandemic? First, there is impact on the business. On the positive side, they are saying that they become much more efficient in cash management, according to these 190 family-owned businesses. They have made it more strict, they're more, they dominate more, and they diversify their products and services. And its impact to the family, on the other hand, is participation and communication increased. As generations pass, we see that there are individuals or shareholders which are cut off and they deal with other industries or have other jobs. But 53% say communication and participation increased. And when it comes to the impact on the society and the employees, 90% say that they have taken better security and safety measures for their employees, and almost half, which means 44%, are giving paid support to their employees. This comes in different forms. For instance, a family-owned business in Latin America is, for instance, organizing pizza parties on Fridays, but everyone at home through Zoom. I don't know how they do it, but they say many participate, and it creates a sense of community. Similarly, there are many families which give direct support to community, to society. We have similar ones. Probably some of our speakers will express that today as well. For instance, supporting hospitals or healthcare professionals. Many of you may not agree, but it seems like they have a bright future, family-owned businesses. According to the participants of this survey, 80% are more optimistic about the future. What are the main lessons that they drove from the pandemic? Act quick, use the opportunities if they come along. And when it comes to values, stick to your values. Those who know about institutionalization know values. We always think about long-lasting values. Values are important. Family-owned businesses should be patient and positive. They should communicate frequently and listen more. Of course, understand the risks and act calmly. And this is very important. Arvid expressed it at the beginning as well. When it comes to making things, don't insist on making things as they were. Just think about how all the changes can help you, and be flexible. Try things that you've never tried before. Of course, like with every sacrifice, the sacrifices that you do here will help you now or later in the medium or long run. They could create big opportunities for you. I deleted the rest because another speaker will present it to you as a surprise. There are many results coming out of the crisis. Again, these are comments that we take directly from family-owned businesses. For instance, they say this is a great opportunity for the second generation because this gave us an opportunity to try them. Or we believe that there will be a big M&A activity in the future, but are we ready for it strategically? Are we financially strong enough? The crisis allowed us to see our weaknesses. This is great. People usually like telling good news, but when you look at the crisis as an impartial party from the outside, it gives you great feedback. For instance, it helps show you your weaknesses. And for instance, remote work. This is forcing many companies to reconsider their work model, and they ask themselves where they're inefficient, and they try to come up with answers. And companies which take care of their employees are much more motivated. They have more motivated and more ready teams. This requires, of course, long-term healthy thinking. And maybe most importantly, the crisis showed us the significance of institutionalization, or our efforts to become more institutionalized. It showed us how vital it is, taking all the decisions in the right way and to come together and have a communication. Yes. So these are some comments from family-owned businesses who were able to come out of the crisis successfully. Okay, there are some, they're asking me to speak louder. I will try to be as loud as possible. I hope I won't disturb you. That brings us to the two main branches of corporate governance. First of all, the family constitution, which concerns the family. And secondly, a board in a family-owned business. This is one of the most important elements. I will try to give you some very vital points without taking too much of your time. And the speakers that come after me will talk about the challenges and problems in different industries through different perspectives. This is a different research now. I can share with you I'm sharing with you the link down below as well. 530 companies, especially from Southern Europe and especially from Spain. If companies use a family constitution, their performance increased significantly in the 2 years that follow the family constitution. And there's a positive relation between the constitution and the company company performance. For instance, if a business is owned by multiple families or has an independent CEO, this is more helpful, especially with the second and third generation. These make the business more successful, especially if they have, for instance, a constitution. So what do these constitutions serve? First of all, it documents the mission, the values, the philosophy, and principles of the previous generation. It helps them devise the strategy of the business altogether, or in times of disagreements or conflicts, which may happen in any family-owned business. It helps you how to resolve those, and it also helps define the roles of individuals. So as fundamental rules, I can give you the following. There is no single format for family agreements. I have worked with 500 different companies, and this is what I have arrived at. There could be many different formats, depends on the family. it has to be simple but comprehensive, which will, it should be just enough as the family or the business requires. And it should cover certain basic issues. What are these basic issues that it should cover? It should cover at least the list here, the list that you see here. For instance, the values and the targets. But secondly, how to balance between the business and family, establish the vision, establish the different councils, board, the structure of the company, the governance structure. Then fourth, communication processes. As you can see in family businesses, communication is very important in, for instance, overcoming the pandemic. Then five, financial principles. What do we buy? Where do we invest? How do we share between the business and family? Then, for instance, recruitment and layoff and prices, wages. Then handover and transition plan. Then the purchase, sales issues between stakeholders, shareholders, and as a current topic, crisis management. All of these, by the way, crisis management is now even more included in family constitutions, but it was not the case in the past before the crisis. But of course, there will always be different forms of crises. As I said, it's not a static process or a fixed document or fixed process. It's more dynamic. It is able to change constantly. Such documents and protocols, in order for them to be processed, there are mechanisms needed like the council or the board. This brings us to another critical question. Do I need somebody's help to do so? No, but of course, an experienced guy could have some advantages. He could suggest you the best way to approach it. He could be independent and allow people to be fair. This person could allow you to not get stuck, but rather reach, focus on the decisions and process rather than individual interests. And he could give you the process and skills that are needed for such a process. I will also give you the steps to a methodology, which has been tried for many years. Always start with values that set you apart from other families. Then your vision, in which you decide all together where you're headed, and followed by that, a detailing of the sharing between you and the business, and that details your commitments. And then, as a result of all of these, your rules. I think this sequence makes sense. By putting the rules at the beginning and taking care of the others as the process goes on, doesn't really work out. The rules can be very long. I have included only a few short ones here. And then as a last step, and we should know the fact in family-owned businesses that without institutionalization in families, the company cannot institutionalize by itself. And of course, corporate governance. The institutionalization of the family on the one side, but on the other hand, corporate governance and a constitution. So structuring in both the family and the business. I'll come to the last part of my presentation, which is we talked about two things: the board and the family's constitution. In this model, let me share with you the building blocks. The one at the base, the strongest one, has to be a family. Without that, we cannot have a family-owned business. Then shareholders, and then at the top, company. If we were face-to-face, I'd ask you directly, but now I will give the answer myself. What is missing here? The family council, a good someone in charge of family communication, the board of shareholders for aware and loyal shareholders, and company work. You know already what company work is. And then in the middle, we have the board, which in order to make sure for a competent and effective organization. The goal here is to coordinate between the family and shareholders to ensure the communication from both channels. When we look at the building blocks, the company work, the owners, etc., they're all, of course, a single block. Of course, they have their own duties. For instance, the company owner, they have to set the roles, they have to set policies, and they set the company targets and vision. And then the board, they take the goals from them and they transfer this to the company. For instance, the strategy, budget, company investment, main policies, and rewarding. They should have a say in all of these. And then company work, company execution is executing in a clear way and to bring those decided policies to the targets. Effective boards play certain roles which are very important. They ensure a bond between the family and the bond, thanks to the communication and thanks to those structures, ensuring a strong bond, and then agreeing on the strategy, controlling the risks and the performance. And what they do, other than that, is to protect the values, the work ethics, especially during crises like COVID, for instance, without losing the calmness, deciding how to act in an agile way, in a flexible way. An independent, good management board has positive impacts to both the business on the left-hand side and the family on the right-hand side. For instance, they can allow them to think on strategic issues, they can help them be more rational, and they can, of course, give certain trust to strong finance institutions like EBRD, for instance, because they can say, we are running your money correctly because we have these certain mechanisms. In the family, it could help with the discipline to help solve the conflicts and bottlenecks. And over time, as the business grows, this is maybe seen more abroad in certain companies, but less in Turkey. For long-running family businesses, for instance, which go to 40 or 50 generations, they allow the passive, non-working shareholders to feel some trust and, of course, showing the way for future generations. IMD in Lausanne is one of the most important business schools in Europe, and it carried out a research on 200 business-owned companies, and 4 different management boards were seen. I won't detail them one by one, but if you're interested, we can discuss them separately. In Turkey, maybe 90% are the executive ones. We have executive family boards. The second one works like a consultant, like an advisor, then Yediyemin or steward. It's not a model that we see in Turkey, so I won't go into its details, but most importantly, the structured, the institutionalized one. I will talk about the executive one, the operative one, which deals with every work and takes every decision. Unfortunately, this is not the board style that we suggest or that helps them be long-lasting. There are 2 problems here. There's no division of powers. The referee and the players are the same person. And secondly, there is no transparent and impartial performance evaluation. It's either impossible or it's very week.
Şirkete ve aileye bağımlı yönetim kurulundan ve operatif çalışan yönetim kurulundan bahsediyorum.
I'm talking about the operative or executive board style.
Bütün araştırmaların
And
yaşattığına inananlar
the one that is usually emphasized by all research is the institutionalized one, which focuses on strategy and investment and on the control mechanisms of the family and business, and open questioning and transparent questioning about execution in a way that is carried out in line with the protocols. Some other duties of the successful boards is to prepare the future generation of the family. This is also very important. Successful boards can be defined as follows. Those who define the roles that they'd like to play, they can balance and diversify board membership with the requirements of the business, and they're independent. Of course, when they collect data, they can also do this in a way that supports all the ones above. I have three main ones, and with that I will finish my presentation. If you have any questions, I will receive them afterwards. Define the role of the board in an original, authentic way, and then design the structure accordingly. So please don't put the chariot before the horse. How many meetings should we have, or how many people should we have at the board? No, these are questions that should come after. But first, you should set the mission of the board and what should be the goals in line with your family targets, and then establish the team from family and from outside. Thank you very much for your attention. Before I pass on the microphone, let me check the time. I have a few more minutes before we go to the next speaker, Şahin Bey. If there are any questions coming from your side, we can receive a couple questions.
Evet, belki şu anda o zaman tam zamanın da üstündeyiz. Ben teşekkürlerle Sayın Şahin Tulga'ya devretmek
Well, we're
istiyorum.
right on time. I'd like to give the floor to Şahin Tulga, Mentoro platform founder and partner. He also has extensive experience in his own field. Without further ado, I'll give the floor to him. Şahin, you have the floor.
Stratejinin yaptığınız strateji çalışmalarından doğru sonuç.
Today, I'll talk about strategy so that you can derive good results from your strategy setting efforts. I'm talking about the proper definition of strategy and the definition that you need to have for it. And I'd like to talk about strategy as the most unlucky aspect of boards, because the conventional definition of strategy is about you going from point A to B, which is your objective. But once you define strategy as this way, strategy can involve everything. And unfortunately, this actually comes as the greatest hurdle. And strategy is a rather challenging problem. And challenging problems include those issues that involve a lot of variables, very, very complex issues I'm talking about here. And I've prepared a presentation. I'd like to share it with you, share my screen with you. I think you can see that. Yes. My topic is the proper definition of strategy, business strategy. Well, this is a problem of bifurcation, actually. So this is something that businesses face every year. What happens is that executives come up with great projections every year. Well, look at year one, for example, in the graph. This is where we are right now, and next year, look at the blue line there. This is how we're going to stand next year, and the following year we're gonna reach there and there and there. So this is basically a pink cloud they come up with, and at the outset of the following year they stand at there in the graph. And this is something that businesses face and experience every year, and unfortunately, and we call it the problem of bifurcation. And the reason behind it is basically improper methods for setting the strategy, and this brings along improper definitions of strategy. Unfortunately, they always expand marginal improvement efforts. For the past 12 years, I've been an advisor to boards, and I'm an expert in business strategies. And there are many erroneous concepts of strategy in the minds of executives. This is a whole list of them, but I'd like to focus on a few of them. Why do we need strategy anyways? We'll be successful by working a lot, some say. And one of the other most frequent concept is the effort to be perfect. And they think that it's a strategy by itself. They try to provide better services, better products, and this is why they don't need a strategy, they think. Objective and strategy, they somehow are intertwined with one another on their minds. Or, for example, growing further is considered to be a strategy wrongly. By the way, this presentation, I'm going to share it with all the participants. You may have a detailed look at them. And they say, let's define the vision and the mission and the values of our business, and let's work with our goodwill and we'll be successful, they say. They tend to think that it's a strategy. And one other frequent problem we see recently is basically confusing the business model and business strategy. They vary greatly though. In business strategy, you need to take into account competition, and in the business model, you don't think about competition. And with this in mind, the strategies that you set are doomed to fail. This is why we have prestigious bosses, business people, executives, and here are the statements by them as we read in the papers. Here are some of the statements they've said. These are the cacophonies of strategy, as we call it. Some say, for example, our strategy is to rank the top or the second in our fields of operation and industries, they say, for example. These are all the examples of inaccurate strategy definitions, because this is all about going from point A to point B, which is our objective. And if we define the strategy like this, they involve a lot of shortcomings and they bring along a lot of wrongdoings. Right strategy and how to formulate it. Well, these are some simple details to set a strategy accurately. This is an example from a manufacturing company, a company that sells after setting up the stocks. And we start on the top, understanding the field of operation and establishing a system for operations, technology, follow-up, development, and acquisition. And then We tap into this technology to develop our products. We plan the production, manufacturing processes. We focus on the procurement, raw materials, intermediary materials we purchase. We then manufacture them, we package them, we market them, we sell them, we ship them to the customer, we install them at the customer's site if needed. We handle the collection and settlement, and then we provide after-sale services. We provide support to address customers' potential problems. And with the findings we derive from these processes, we rerun the process. As we rerun the process, we have 6 resources: people, organization, knowledge, communication, finance, and physical resources. And we manage them well in this process. So this is basically the general environment of our operations. And this environment of operations is under the impact of political, environmental, and social components, and they change all the time. Currently, we look at the environmental setting due to the pandemic, and in this environment, you have all the players that you can see in the slide. All the institutions here, businesses here, like you are here, you are basically working with a value chain. And this is the environment for operations that you conduct. Each and every step here, underneath them, you have activities. And this basically constitutes your environment for operation. And for you to run this environment, you need certain capabilities. 6 resources I cited in the previous slide, and you have certain corporate capabilities. 6 resources that you have, and in integration with these resources, you work towards accomplishing your tasks in the best manner possible. So this is a system for your operations, an operating system, so to speak, and this needs to be different than the competition. This is what brings you to success, and this is the main tenet of the strategy. And these 6 resources should run concurrently, simultaneously. You have certain corporate capabilities for this. And thanks to these capabilities, you have a well-functioning operating system or an ill-functioning operating system, depending on your capabilities. And in the meantime, your objective is profit. And this is one of the most painful results for organizations. You take all the risks throughout the year, but you still can't make profit. This is the formula for profitability. It's just like a picture of happiness. For each product, the quantities that you sell multiplied by unit price. This unit cost that we call is basically the measurement for the competitive edge that you have. Your objective is to expand the difference between the unit sales price and unit cost. What does Mercedes do, for example? They design automobiles, buses, vehicles, and their sales price that customers are willing to pay, they increase this unit sales price. And as they do so, their unit costs are on the increase as well, because they employ good designers, they employ good quality plastics, they expand their marketing activities, etc. But they make sure that the unit sales price is higher than the increase of the unit costs. Shock, Beam, A101, these are discounters. They try to reduce the unit cost, and this reduction in the unit cost is higher than the rise in the sales price that customers or consumers would like to pay. So this is how they expand the difference between the two. In this formula, quantity sold is important as well, because this has an impact on the unit sales price and unit costs. Competitive edge is measured according to this formula, and you can see the definition of that. Well, this is about your business, a project that you are about to perform, a unit that you have within your organization. This is about reaching a good level of profitability at these levels. This is when you have a competitive edge. This is how we define it. And what matters is the difference between the two. And for you to do that, the difference between the unit sales price and unit cost. In order to expand the difference between them, you need to increase the unit sales price and decrease the unit cost, as I said. And there are 5 key ways to increase unit selling price. And the most important is basically creating customer benefit that is ideal for your target group. This is when your consumers feel more willing to pay higher selling prices. And you can look at the others after I share the presentation with you. And there are 15 main methods to reduce the unit costs, optimizing the products, for example, not necessarily having a great appetite to provide a lot of products, because this will cause complexity in costs. And this may also increase your unit costs. You need to optimize your capabilities. You need to optimize the value that you offer, because offering a lot of benefits and offering great value may also pave the way for greater costs. But at the outset, in the first place, businesses tend to offer a greater value so that customers pick you. But this is something that also adds to your unit costs. Please have a look at it after I finish. There are 9 main methods to increase the quantity sold. One way is to basically offer what your target group needs at the most affordable prices. So these are 9 main methods for you to increase the quantities sold. And we also need to take into account the types of economy here in strategy. One is a scale economy with a focus on supply. And we have scale economies with a focus on demand. This is about the number of stakeholders, the number of customers. The higher the number of stakeholders is, you need to increase the quantities sold. So the more you have them, the more data you have. And thanks to this data, you get to know your stakeholders better. The better you understand them, the greater the value you offer. So the greater the value you offer, the greater the quantity sold or the unit sales price. And you also can diversify the products. This is how you can offer greater value to customers. And this is how you can also increase the unit sales price or the quantities that you sell. But you need to be very careful here because the number of products we're talking about, there is an optimum value to that. And after this tipping point, let's say, complexity costs come into play and systems start to run backwards. I'll also talk about the components of defining a proper business strategy. Strategy, well, for your business, for your product, for your department, or for the market that you aim. We can talk about the regions, we can talk about the target groups, we can talk about the target products. So in those markets, they need to have sustainable competitive edge because competitive edge is about unit costs and unit selling prices. So this is basically what you design so that you can reach all your objectives. If you focus on that definition, you won't really face a lot of challenges. And one important point here is actually about the plan that you design. Your target customers and your suppliers, their needs should be addressed in a proper manner. Corporate capabilities, you have certain corporate capabilities based on 6 resources. You need to optimize the number of corporate capabilities, and many businesses have a lot of corporate capabilities and they think it's a great thing. But this is quite the contrary of the strategy. We don't really want to have 20 or 30 corporate capabilities. We want to have products based on up to 8 corporate capabilities because the products that you offer result in great costs. So this is what we talk about when we say a proper definition of the strategy. So by using this strategy, we can quickly grasp the meaning of main aspects of strategy. First of all, target markets. This should help you enhance your unit profitabilities. I mean, your objectives should help you boost your profitability, and you need to analyze your competitors first. Your competitors, where do they stand in terms of competitive edge, for example? You need to understand it. And you need to set objectives to reduce the gap between them. And it is easy to set objectives, but the following steps, step 3 and step 4, defining them, determining them, is more difficult. The decisions that you need to pass for that and the activities that you'll undertake for that, you need to determine them. And strategy definition is also associated with step 4 here. The competitive edge should be sustainable, and you need to understand the steps that you'll take. Well, yes, making the competitive edge sustainable. We're talking about the sustainability of that. And one way is to focus on the capabilities that you have at your organization, and you need to deepen them. You need to further deepen them. And the other way is to make sure that your competitors aren't able to copy or duplicate the way you achieve a competitive edge. There are 25 components and elements to strategy. Well, assuming that your strategy is properly defined. The first is attractive markets. What do we mean by that? It is actually you determining target countries and regions, target stakeholder groups, including your customers, interim customers, for example, or end users. They can be those stakeholders that have an impact on your business. And target products and services, you need to determine them. Well, Apple, I think about a company as big as Apple, and China is their largest market. And they have decided to penetrate China years after they reach success. So you shouldn't jump into certain markets straight away. You need to pick markets so carefully that you need to make sure that you have the capabilities to provide the trust, and you need to have the confidence that you'll be successful in those markets. You need to limit the number of the products on offer because you should avoid complexity here. I'm checking my time. I have 5 minutes left, and afterwards I'll conclude. The second point is, okay, you choose the attractive markets, and this will have certain consequences. What's the type of your business? What's the type of your operations, for example? This is quite important for your strategy. Is this growing markets, for example, or what kind of sectors are we talking about?
Gerçekler nelerdir ve buna bağlı olarak da
What about the
başarı
facts and figures in these sectors? And what about the success factors for these sectors and markets? Because each and every sector has their unique and inherent success factors. You need to differentiate them. You need to select them. It could be the mining sector, it could be the retail sector, and they have different factors. In the mining sector, for example, the unit price, you can't really set the unit price because the London Stock Exchange will set the unit price for that, and you have to comply with that. But it doesn't mean that, okay, I'm not offering any value to my customers because my unit selling price is the same. No, you need to offer greater value, and this is when you can start selling more. Anyways, then what about your objectives and goals here? The value that you offer and the unit cost, the difference between them, how should it be positioned vis-a-vis the competitors? What about the quantities? What about the unit cost and the quantities sold? Total cost, overall cost, well, this involves variable costs and fixed costs. What about my figures? What kind of figures do I aim for? Well, this is quite important because generation Y, Z, and X are driven by philosophical motivations. They're different from our generation here. So you need to move them. You need to derive them both in terms of employees and consumers. You need to have a cause that will drive them. So these are still the elements to a good strategy. These are the elements that you need to tap into while defining the strategy. Okay, you determine the objectives and goals here, and then you need to make certain decisions. The first is positions. Well, for example, target stakeholders. Why should they pick you? Why should they choose you? We have 8 positions here, and you need to define them properly. And each and every position will require certain set of skills on your side. Stakeholders, what about the benefits and value that we will offer to them? A greater value will require a lot of capabilities, and a lot of capabilities will result in higher costs, and we need to be careful about that. And how to access really our target groups. And on the other side of the spectrum is, okay, find me on the internet. And the other end is about visiting the customers. And we need to strike a balance between them. If our target group is willing to pay the cheapest price possible, in this case, okay, find me on Google, order, place orders for my products online. But if we are talking about value-driven customers, we need to pay visits to them. What about the cost items? What about my pricing methods? Because pricing methods also have a wide spectrum here. Some customers and firms are like, okay, you need to determine the prices. And some companies say, okay, this is my price and pay it if you're willing to. So we need to be careful about that. Main stakeholders here and main suppliers, what about the value we'll offer to them? Because suppliers are important here in reducing our unit costs. We need to get more affordable prices from them so that we can offer the value we promise to customers. Cost units, cost items, strategic aspects, our operations and activities, strategic activities. We have hundreds of strategic activities. Some of them are strategic that provide us with a competitive edge. Something like 15 of them. We need to set them properly, and which activities should be performed by others, and what kind of capabilities do we need to have to achieve that, and which resources do we need for these capabilities. And this is my last final slide. Strategy is about doing the right thing as much as it is about doing the business properly. Thank you very much for your attention.
Ben de çok teşekkürler. Evet, bazı sorular var bana direkt gelen.
Evet.
Değerli stratejiyi bu kadar geniş kapsamlı bir şekilde inceleyen sunumunuz için. Şimdi kalan 3-4 dakikamızda onları rica edeceğim sizden. Bir tanesi şöyle.
We have a few questions that we have received. First of all, creating a risk strategy before risks occur. Could this be possible and how? And the second question is, the first one was crisis strategy. Secondly, is this the shareholders or the board's duty to create a strategy? Did you see my questions? Okay, these are $1 million questions and they're great. Yes, creating a crisis strategy is possible. The strategy is tailor-made, like a dress is tailor-made. Not every strategy fits every company in every industry. For instance, certain strategies have become more stronger after the crisis, and one of the reasons why is because there was an increase in demand, and in other industries there has been a shrinkage of demand. So first, we need to first foresee this happening, foresee what is going to happen. The crisis environment, what is it going to bring to us? There is a cycle that I have mentioned. It's one of the earlier slides. In which steps are we going to have problems in that? One of the problems that I will have in one of the steps is probably the supply chain. Many companies did have that indeed. And in some industries, it could be a crisis in sales and marketing. In some industries, it was a crisis in deliveries. And we have to foresee that and prepare our strategies according to our possible crises. And secondly, whose duty is it to create the strategy? Actually, it is the board, and the shareholders are part of it, and the execution. It's their shared duty. The board, of course, cannot be lazy and claim that the strategy it falls on the shoulders of the execution. No, they should create it together. The strategy creation methodology is an iterative one, the one that I have described, which means execution creates a strategy and brings it to the board, and the board sees what is deficient and will ask them to complete those deficiencies. Then execution works again and brings to the board. And after a few iterations, it is finalized. It's important to note that if I intervene in execution's work, I cannot bring them to account after. No, this is not the right way of thinking. The board can bring the execution to account. The board can say, okay, yes, we have created the strategy together, but are you really owning it up and will you bring it to results? Once they ask this question, then the rest is up to the execution to put that strategy into practice. And the board from time to time has to check where they are. Thank you very much. I'm sure there are many more questions from our colleagues, but we're almost using our time almost perfectly. And now we have to shift to our next speaker, which means, as the cartoon said, the board cannot be lazy and cannot deal with operative issues and forget about strategy. Okay, then. Now I shift to Mehmet Sami, who is the founder of Pretium Corporate Consulting, and is asking you a big question. Are you ready for corporate finance alternatives? Mehmet Bey, the floor is yours. Thank you very much and have a nice day to all of you. My name is Mehmet Sami. I have a very comprehensive presentation, some polls. Also, please ask your questions. Don't shy away from asking your questions. Can you see my screen? If you do, okay, that's great. Let me show you the perspective, because this is a unique perspective, the one that I have. For almost 32 years, I have been active in corporate financing and capital markets. I was in the committee of the first private equity fund of Turkey, and I've been in boards for almost 20 years, and I am working as an independent member in 4 different companies. So I had a chance to understand and use these different perspectives as I looked at corporate finance. So why have people started noticing about corporate finance? First, to create trust. This spread from the West to the rest of the world, which means it's now a global term. How was it created? Let's remember. The stock exchanges and legislators developed rules, and corporate investors like EBRD started measuring by audits and by applying discounts and bonuses, and I'll explain them later. But especially in the past couple years, now measurement goes to a different level, which means not just looking at financials is the old method now. The environment, social and governance principles, ESG principles, is now part of our lives. Even if it's not, it is imminent, and I'll detail that within my presentation. Is there a model that we can copy and put the practice right away? There is no copyable model because there is no perfectly applied model. We experiment through examples and principles. Why corporate governance is important? It is the main building block of corporate finance. First, it allows you to reach financing. It decreases the cost of capital. It allows better operational performance, better use of resources, better risk management, and corporate investors Do they prioritize corporate governance? Yes, but how do they do it? They do it through premiums and discounts, bonuses and discounts, and let's always keep that in mind. You see a circle, and corporate governance is in the very center, and alternative finance resources are outside. You see a couple examples: financial partner, strategic partner, capital markets, and in the middle you see, as Şahin Bey said very well, there is strategy, reporting, which is very important, both internal and external, corporate structure, human resources, and another new region is the ESG, environment, social, and governance. The ESG principles are now about to be part of it as well. Okay, then what is the value of a company for corporate finance? Because I'll be very simple. It is important for the shareholder, but it's not how much the company is worth, or it's not its sales and investment. But what is expectation? Growth in cash flow. We need to always look at the cash flow. It is more than capital cost, and how can I create more cash with less capital? This is our main goal. And what is this method? Maybe it's very simple, but it's not a report taken from IT or from accounting. We need to calculate it. And when do we calculate it, as the next question? Just with every property when it changes hands. Now I'd like to take a quote from Warren Buffett, the American investor. Price is what you pay, value is what you get. Which means we're talking about getting something. If I am able to, I will ask you where you come from, because we have close to 70 participants. I think I'm unable to activate the polls. If you can put up my first question, please answer this question very quickly.
Görünüyor mu acaba? Ben görüyorum. Çok basit, hemen
There are two questions, and they're very simple questions. Let's allow 20 seconds. The first question is, in your board, do you have any member outside family members and the manager? And secondly, I will stop there first. Let's look at the results. Yes, 57%. Okay, there's some balance here. The second question is, do you have independent external audits? The answer to this is also great. And this is what I would expect from participants of EBRD. But of course, in the reality of Turkey, this is unfortunately the exception, and not everyone has this. Thank you very much for the information, because I'll continue my presentation accordingly. And if you have questions, please ask them. How to calculate a company's value? I won't go into its details, but we have different methods: net asset value, market coefficients, similar transactions. The most important one for us is DCF, making a 5 or 10-year business plan and bring the cash flow to today. And this will go to different points later. Why? Because you create value when things are changing hands. When it comes to transforming to cash, it's very important. What we mean by corporate finance is, we see financing and budgeting. Of course, risk is involved in it as well, but the main building blocks of corporate finance is, first, it can be a public offering. You can issue shares or bonds or bills. There are some new products here. I will mention them: the green bill or social bill. Secondly, you can do financial or strategic partnership. For instance, if you're working with EBRD and EBRD is investing shares, they have a certain exit target as a financial investor. So with this exit either your financial or strategic partner, or you can buy back your shares. You can create value in corporate financing through such products. Let's look at the market. I always look long term because when it comes to corporate finance, one of the most important success factors is timing. Timing is very important because you cannot do these movements instantly. They take a long time to prepare and they're not easy to execute. And this is about our market. For instance, a 10-year CDS premium of us, the red is our risk premium. It's now lower, but compared to other countries, it's still high. In the past, except for the past 3 or 4 years, we had a very good market in order to carry out corporate finance actions. As I said before, strategic and financial investment is also important. For instance, here you see the 10-year trend. Looking above, you see strategic investment. The line is the amount, units, 140 transactions have been carried out last year in Turkey, and in previous years it was around 200, which means there is some decrease, and the number isn't a high number. And below you see financial investors. We see an increase here, but this increase, of course, especially in the past few years, 165 happened last year, and most of them are venture capitals, risk-taking funds. Within all these M&A processes, the most important factor is who the investors are. So both in strategic and financial investment, is it the Turks or foreigners? We need to keep that in mind as well.
Finansmanın olmazsa olmazı sermaye piyasaları, özellikle de hisse senedi halka arzları. Yine size bu sefer 20 yıllık bir perspektif çiziyorum. Bu 20 yıllık perspektif,
this is a 20-year perspective. You see the number of companies which are offered publicly. Keep in mind, in some years there is none. In 2019, very few public offering. In others, there is more. And below you see the amount in terms of million Turkish liras. The most important criteria here is, as companies are growing, if they are to come to capital markets, what kind of a public offering are they planning? And let me tell you what the colors mean. Green means capital increase, and red is shared sales, and then there's a hybrid method as well. As a person who carried out 80 public offerings, if you're only thinking about shared sales, the investor doesn't like that too much, because the investor wants the money to go into the company. So capital increase should be our main goal. But there are some hybrid methods as well. It depends on the company's story and designating the vision in the right way. In 2018, there were major, for instance, public offerings, Shock, Medical Park, or Enerjisa Energy. That's why the amount was high. In 2021, a similar movement is happening. What is important here is the size of the company. There are certain minimum criteria introduced by the Capital Markets Board of Turkey and expectations of the investors. But there's a big gray area in between, and they need to all be analyzed in detail, because if you are in this gray area, that means you will have problems or you will not be able to go public at all. Another method is borrowing instruments. Above you see public, and below you see private debt stock. as you can see, there is a bank movement starting. Banks are using these bills and bonds very good because they have corporate know-how a lot. The year that the banks were allowed to do that, in 2010, banks started issuing bonds. In the private industry, unfortunately, it's not used as much as needed. The dues, the terms are very short and not a lot of money was raised this way. And then loans, I don't see it as a source for corporate finance, but as a trend, Turkish banks strengthened after the crisis, and they have increased their credit volume. This was also backed by the treasury-backed mechanisms or credit guarantee fund, and it increased to very serious amounts, but it's not a corporate financing instrument. Then let's come to the new segment. I will have one more question for you. Please, if you have any questions, start typing your questions as well. Let me check if we can put up my second question. Please answer your question. Do you have corporate financing experience? If so, how? Public offering, bills, bonds, financial partnership, strategic partnership, a few of the above and none of the above.
Evet, son 2-3 saniye.
Last few seconds. It's very interesting. This audience here do need a dialogue. So I must also ask EBRD. We need to work more on this. 76% of the answers are none of the above. There are opportunities here and companies here must be prepared. And maybe we can go into more details of this with EBRD. Now I'll talk about a new segment, which is very important because we now have a new term in our lives. In the past, we used to have sustainability goals, or we did not. Now we have ESG principles in our lives as well. Sustainability and ESG principles are coming together. We should not be confused. They're similar, but ESG principles are followed by capital markets and investors. These are standards and principles which should be adopted by boards. For instance, the public companies, the boards that I'm involved in, we devise ESG strategies starting this year. And as soon as possible, we have to make this a reality because new financial products are coming as well. A second issue is financial reporting, and financial reports will turn into integrated reports, which means investors will not want to see financials only. In integrated reporting, non-financial issues will also be reported. These are very significant issues, and sanctions will be maybe on our way in a few years' time. You will receive some of these slides. In order to attract more investment, companies must make transparency part of their culture. This we have to show our relations with all of our stakeholders, and this is what the ESG principles will do, and that what they're targeting. My time is limited, so I'll skip over. What is the new segment that I talk about? Sustainable finance. On the left-hand side, this is globally, by the way, you see the issuances of sustainable finance, which means companies have started issuing new type of products. It's in English, I'm sorry, because I borrowed it from a bank. The green bars that you see are green bonds. Then there is social bonds. You see such terms now. These are increasing very rapidly. On the right-hand side, sustainable funding investors. The blue is shares, green is fixed revenue instrument investing funds. So you see investors who are only looking for this kind of instruments, and it's increasing. They're increasing, and Bloomberg said last week that in 5 years' time, this will be 1/3 of all managed money in the world, which means a company, we will not have any companies without ESG principles if you want to enter corporate financing segments. What is happening in Turkey? The Capital Markets Board is changing. They have changed their corporate governance legislation, and they called it harmonization with sustainability principles. It is harmonize or explain principle. It's not compulsory yet. If you are a public company, by 2021, you will either have to comply or explain according to the comply or explain principle. The principles here, the sustainability or ESG principles, corporate governance, social, environment, all of your criteria in these 3 areas, you will be asked to explain them. This is more compulsory abroad, and in Turkey, it's not yet compulsory. If you start explaining this, both the Borsa Istanbul and Capital Markets Board have created an index for these issues, corporate governance and sustainability indices, in order to support. And even if it's a little, you can still get some financial opportunities here. I'm open to your questions because we need to be as interactive as possible in such processes. There are issues that we should question for success criteria. First, asset management board, executive board, EBRD emphasizes this as well, and we have emphasized it today. An active board is very important. We have a new association called Management Board Members Association, which is to tell families the significance of a very active board, because otherwise in generational transitions we will have losses in our country. We believe this should be underlined. Secondly, a national strategy. Şahin Bey explained it very well. We need to set our strategies very well. Growth plans are very important for me, because in corporate finance, growth, either organic or inorganic, and long-term business plans have to be very clearly prepared, because without that, you cannot issue shares or bonds, or you cannot enter new type of instruments. So there are 7 titles under success criteria. First of all, this is something that I've tested over years and seen results of. First, preparation. You have to prepare for corporate financing products, first of all. Secondly, using specialists and consultants, both for the strategy and for the process management. Third, structuring. You need to think carefully about how to structure. Fourth, timing, as I explained before. You cannot enter the markets, and the market is not always open, or you're not always ready. Fifth, evaluation criteria. Are you making a right and fair evaluation assessment? You cannot have quick wins. In the short run, maybe you can go public, but in a couple years' time, the investors will abandon you. So you need to think carefully about your appraisal and valuation. Then negotiation capabilities. If you're negotiating with a financial or strategic partner, you need to develop skills for negotiation. And seventh, compliance with ESG principles and standards. This is a new topic, a brand new area. We are emphasizing these issues in the boards of public companies now and working hard on it, because the Green Deal, which was brought by Europe, is a very new term, the Green Deal. It will come to Turkey sooner or later. If you are a company exporting to Europe, in your export, certain things will be questioned, even if it's a simple export. So you need to comply with the ESG principles. And my last two slides, where is success? In corporate financing, corporate governance is very important. You have to create a sustainable structure. You need to be innovative. Of course, follow current trends. Performance. Its performance is followed, risk should be evaluated. Do we have a risk committee? How does our company measure risk? Do we measure and do we benchmark? Are we open to audits and transparent? In the green bonds and social bonds that I've just mentioned, there are now third-party ratings. So certain people come and rate you in terms of how much environmental investments you're carrying out or how you protect the environment. These things will happen. And of course, ethical values. As a result, where does success lie? Independent and questioning boards and strong leaders. This is the end of my presentation. If you do have any questions, I'm open to them. Thank you very much. There are questions. I will summarize two of them. First is about information. What is integrated reporting? Could you briefly explain it? And secondly, about the crisis and the pandemic. Cash flow became more important, but in terms of access to finance, what kind of critical changes have happened? Okay, integrated reporting is a new term, and associations have been formed in our country as well about integrated reporting. ERTA, ERTA is, for instance, one such organization. Please follow them. They have special trainings and special sessions talking about integrated reporting, but intangibles, for instance, not just financing, but intangibles are now going to be reported as well. This is what I mean by integrated reporting. Not just industrial companies, but also service and finance industries can do this as well. For instance, a bank like Garanti Bank, they have integrated reporting. If you open their activity report, you can see this even last year. You can see what it includes. Cash flow was always the king. I'm sorry, not during the pandemic only. As I said, it's been 32 years that I've doing this job, and 30 years ago, cash flow was important. Today, it's still important. Depends on your perspective. Of course, during the pandemic, some will come to the fore, some will stay behind. This is introduced by the crisis, yes, but we have seen many crises in our country. And in these crises, we always know the significance of cash flow. That's one. And secondly, if you ask me what opportunities are, entirely for corporate finance especially, it depends on how the markets go. For instance, in an environment where interests are low, our investors, especially individual to retail investors, have started investing into Borsa Istanbul. The same in the US as well. Interests are much lower there. So in the US, there's a retail investors now. So in public offering, 100 companies are waiting in line to go public. I don't want to blame anyone, but you need to prepare well and you need to do the timing well. There's no point in being quick in going public, because if you're planning for public offering, it has to be based on a sustainable value. What do I mean? If you go public with a 10 lira value over time, you must have this rise. You must be predicting this to rise, because in 5 years' time, with a 1 to 2% private sales, you can create so much capital from this, you can finance your new investment of your company from here. But if your price is going down, if you cannot do a secondary one or classification, then this is a dead investment for you, and the investors will not be interested in you, and you'll be left there. And unfortunately, this is a mistake that is made by many companies in our country. So preparation is the most important topic. Thank you very much. Betting for the right horse at the right time. But still, thank you very much.
Yalnız çok kısa, yarım dakikada cevaplayabilirseniz, yoksa bana da soru vardı, sonuna bırakacağım. Sonda kalanlara, ki bundan sonraki konuşmacılara da yeterince vakit verelim.
I'll leave the question to the end of the workshop. Well, this is about the corporate governance index for family businesses. We don't have it in Turkey at the moment, but we can work with Haluk to come up with something like that. Maybe we can go into the details of that afterwards. Well, a very, very philosophical question. And Aclan Acar will be the only person who will basically answer that. Do crises lead to problems, or do they actually uncover the existing problems within companies? Thank you very much. First of all, I'd like to greet all participants. I would like to thank EBRD for organizing such a workshop, and I'd like to thank Haluk for moderating this workshop, for chairing this workshop. Actually, I don't have a presentation, and I don't have a presentation for particular reasons. Actually, I wrote a book, and it is about the management of transformation based on my own experiences. Haluk, Şahin, and Mehmet, Sami here have been focusing on the theoretical aspect of that. And in the past 5 decades, actually, I've been in the sector for the past 47 years. And I will talk about the physical examples, real examples, the practical side of the theory itself. These have coincided with crises, and some of them actually took place without a crisis in place. So, do crises lead to problems, or do they actually uncover a problem that's already existing? Well, the opinion of the participants matters quite a lot here, but based on my own experience up to date, problems normally exist prior to crises, and actually crises uncover the problems, because the same crisis may have a more negative impact on certain businesses, while it doesn't have to cause the same impact. Well, some people get flu and get the cold quite easily, but those people with a very strong immune system, or businesses with a very well-functioning governance system, survive better. This is the main idea behind it. And today, I'll talk about the critical steps for the survival of businesses and strategic supply channels, and how to manage them during important and critical times. And I'll provide a few examples on that as well. Haluk is basically on the governance aspect of this issue, and Mehmet talked about the corporate finance aspect of that. And all these aspects have been quite an important priority at the times of crises. And what I see in real life is actually the importance of due diligence. What does it mean? It's basically like going through a checkup. It's actually taking a diagnostic test. Where do we stand? How does this crisis affect us? And where do we go from now onwards? We need to understand the damage, because without understanding the damage, we can't really set our direction. Imagine a car crash, for example. There are people who got injured. They have a heart attack, but at the same time they have a broken bone. Would you prioritize the broken bone, or would you prioritize the heart attack? You can't really reach anywhere, get anywhere without tending to the heart attack first. So cost management and issues as critical as that come to the fore. Cash flow is also critical for us. Unless you accurately plan liquidity and cash flow, you can't really plan anything else afterwards. You don't have the chance to do that. And when companies don't make profits, they can survive, but a very, very profitable company without managing liquidity and cash flow can go bankrupt. And this is something I've seen quite a lot. We need to be very careful about that. And Şahin Bey also mentioned that in his presentation, cost and income and the relation between them. He has talked about that. So revenue, you can't really have a direct control on that, especially in highly competitive markets. In markets where the competition is quite fierce, the income or the revenue is basically set by the market itself. Yes, you may have a great product on offer, but more competitive price may be offered to customers, and you may basically lose your customers to these kinds of affordable prices. But controlling the cost is something that you can achieve. So this is why I always focus on the cost side of it and the expenditure side of it, because if in a single hole can be enough to sink a ship, and we need to focus on the cost. This is what I'm trying to say. And as other panelists and speakers mentioned, under pressure, under stress, you need to maintain your calm, because if you don't do that, you will make wrong decisions one after the other. The upper buttons of that, if you button yourself inaccurately, you won't be able to button yourself up. You need to be very careful about the steps that you take. Yes, managing risk properly is critical, and in terms of governance, risk management committees should be established. If it's a small family-owned business, you need to have dedicated teams. Early detection of risk is also critical. And yes, I talked about the book that I wrote. I wrote that book in 2019, and in 2020, stagnation was awaiting us. And this is something that I mentioned in the book as well. Looking at the economy in the world, I understood that that was something on the way. So stagnation is not a surprise. What's a surprise is the pandemic impact of that. But without the pandemic in place, we would still face stagnation, because there were ongoing trade wars between the States and China. And between the States and Iran, there were political tensions. So these would be the triggers of that. But pandemic had a different impact, that's for sure. It was just like somebody hit the stagnation button. So it hit the entire world. And hopefully towards the end of the year, we will slowly recover from that. And you need to make decisions in an agile and swift manner. You need to adapt yourself to change swiftly, because you shouldn't really miss any opportunities. And strategy is key here. And after you define the strategy, even if you define it properly, you need to implement them properly. You need to make sure that it's executed accurately. I really believe that it's important based on my previous experiences. Sometimes you set the vision properly, you define the strategy properly. For example, your strategy of going global. But this is very well set, but on the side of implementation, you may fail. Maybe you don't even allocate the right resources, right people for it. So strategic supply channels, how to manage them in executing the strategy. It's quite important, actually. And the COVID is a crisis with a focus on the demand, and especially in certain industries, demand has come to a stall. And in other industries, we didn't see the same impact, and we saw some industries growing even. Healthcare industry, the medical industry, for example, this has grown, and telecommunications industry has grown rapidly. IT technologies, they've grown rapidly. Food and beverages, for example, so services industry has faced significant shrinkage, narrowing, and everybody has to follow a certain direction, certain strategy. One size doesn't fit all, so a single formula will not be efficient for everybody. So this is a call out to all the participants. I'm not actually dictating any advice on any of them. So significant diagnostic studies should be performed so that you understand where you stand properly. This is what I mean. So supply chain, as you manage the supply chain, you need to understand the demand, because if the demand has come to a stall, maybe manufacturing has to be suspended, or maybe to a partial extent. You need to understand the production capacity and the stocks, inventories. And here is an example from the telecom industry. At Türk Telekom, before the pandemic, before the outbreak of COVID-19, yes, there were talks of a virus, but World Health Organization didn't declare it a pandemic. But back then, Türk Telekom established a team for that, because the parts and materials used and produced, a significant part of that was being procured from Far East Asia. So the pandemic would start from China, and it would start from China and spread across the world. This is how we understood it. That's why we had a very well level of stock, so we stocked ourselves up. I believe that that team delivered great efforts. I'm not only talking about the demand side of it. In terms of logistics, they handled the process very well. So everybody in their own field of business should pay attention to this. Your existing business partners and suppliers, to what extent will they be impacted by that? The impact of COVID-19, for example, you can't come up and say some of the materials and parts you're using, they may be produced not in China, but in Europe, but still producers in Europe are probably procuring their resources from China. So you need to understand which supplier will be impacted, will be affected. New suppliers should be discovered, and this is what we did at Türk Telekom. Significant part of production started to take place in Turkey. Sales operations should be planned accurately. Sales channels should also be planned accurately. Doğuş Automotive, for example, I was the chairperson at Doğuş Automotive, and an automobile dealer in the face of such a crisis can survive by working very well with financial institutions, suppliers, and distributors. They can, for example, survive by deferring certain credit repayments. So this is the strategic perspective that you need to acquire in these types of crises. What kind of limitations do we face? Do you, for example, see the limitations on the side of production or raw materials? Do you have problems in terms of a shipment? Alternative methods should be devised here, depending on your answer. And a dynamic approach is quite important here because you can have the plan in place, you can have the strategy in place, and the boards and committees that you have may be quite ready to manage it, but your formulas and your plans may not turn out to be quite effective in real life. So you need to have the agility and flexibility to change all the plans. So the teams should be brainstorming on this flexibility to ensure business continuity. At telco companies, IT technology and equipment is procured from external sources, and one thing we did was to increase the level of inventories, and we were very well stocked. And
herhangi bir iletişim kesintisine yol açmadan
except a few interruptions, we have handled the process very well. So executive teams and field teams have been quite successful, and I would like to congratulate them once again, because over 40,000 was the number we received in requests, and actually maintaining the capability of addressing them was quite a success. Yes, we've had certain interruptions. Sometimes it was impossible for us to address the incoming demand and requests, but we acted quite promptly. And workshops and webinars are being organized today on digital environments, on digital platforms, and many companies are working with digital tools at the moment. And imagine how critical it would be for you to face interruptions in these services. As long as you have water flowing, you won't really understand how critical it is to have water at your house. And as long as you have IT services delivered to you in an uninterrupted fashion, you won't really understand how critical it is. The moment you lose it, you understand how critical it is. So teams and companies that perform these kinds of essential tasks, they should work in a manner to never cause any delays and interruption in service delivery. Yes, the pandemic had a different impact on different industries. Family-owned businesses saw a certain type of effects. Mr. Haluk, for example, said in his presentation that 5% of the businesses now face a risk of bankruptcy, but businesses should now establish a certain structure that will help survive in the face of crises. Can we really detect incoming crises? So yes, we can to a certain extent. When you look at the definition of crisis, actually it is something that comes when you're least prepared, but the growth trends can be at least understood and examined properly. And in the meantime, we need to focus on businesses with good governance skills. And I have many examples of these companies in my book. In the beginning of 2000s, I was the chairman of the board at Tansash. Only a few changes had been introduced to that company back then, and 60 million USD was the market cap, and they dropped it to 575 million USD in 4 years, in a matter of 4 years. We had different practices back then. We only tackled the governance side of it. We defined the strategy properly.
metrekare
And it was thanks to this change that we did. We didn't change the footprint that we had. We basically increased our sales by threefold. So when you have good governance in place, you will see the changes taking place and unfolding in your company. This is why governance principles should be widely adopted in this country. And Mr. Haluk is a valuable friend of mine, and he has been the chairman of the Corporate Governance Association. I have taken over his duty right now, and we're working with great willingness to make sure that these principles are widely adopted in the country. The presentation will be conveyed to you, but if you're looking to find out detailed information, I have all the details in my book. Thank you. Thank you very much for your attention. And if you have any questions, I'll be willing to answer. The speakers that we have with us today, they've always extended great support to corporate governance. Mehmet Sami is the president of an association in the field of corporate governance. It's really great to have people working in this area. This question is about a recent survey conducted. And the survey was conducted by McKinsey. And during the pandemic, businesses started to focus on reliance on limited number of suppliers. But will it really be cost effective? Because businesses will now only focus on having multiple suppliers, just like this Japanese strategy of sourcing the materials from different suppliers to make sure that everybody is ready in the face of crises. Well, maybe though some years aren't about making profits. If you can't really supply a certain product, it really doesn't matter for this product to have cost-effective or affordable prices. If you can't really provide internet services, it really doesn't matter if its price is high or low, because you won't even be able to organize these kinds of meetings without the internet. Yes, we had to incur a lot of costs to make sure that our stocks were ready, but another phase of it was the probability of interruption. So this case is for other industries as well. You may be driving electric cars, and certain chips may be procured from China and Japan. If this is something that will basically have an impact on your production, you need to tackle a certain trade-off. So will it be rather costly, or should we take the risk of interruption in the production? Sometimes you need to take this risk of high costs, and this is the period that we're in. The same goes for vaccination efforts, for example. Yes, you can manufacture vaccines at the moment, but the production of syringes is quite high. Yes, we don't really have the system through which we will administer the drug into people. Will we prioritize human health here, or will we prioritize the costs the companies will have to incur? So rather than playing it by the book, we need to examine the situation on a case-by-case basis. Yes, the shearings. I will take this into account because we are talking about the bottles of the drug here through which we will administer the drug. So extra investments are being made into this area because 100 million, well, assuming that everybody will have to be vaccinated, in the coming 5 to 6 months, you will need to have 150 million vials. So this is a significant number here, and this number is only for Turkey. Well, managing supply chain, well, these has been examples from your own experience. Actually, I would like to convey this question to you. Well, yes, suppliers are suppliers, and there is one company, Procter & Gamble. We never called them suppliers, we called them partners. Even 3 decades ago, they were our business partners. And the dealers you were talking about, and those automotive company you were talking about, and maybe we'll have a system where companies will collaborate with supportive partners. Maybe this position of supportive partners will come to the fore for us. The World Economic Forum held meetings this year, and stakeholder capitalism was one of the highlights of these meetings. So the concept of business partners, as you mentioned, at Doğuş Automotive, we always referred our suppliers as business partners. So you have multiple stakeholders there, manufacturers, the stakeholders in the field of logistics, the retail side of it. When you have a look at the entire chain, your employees likewise are included in this chain. Well, this is a mechanism of stakeholders and partners. And one stakeholder may be dissatisfied or may face interruptions in their activities. And you can be as strong as the weakest link in the chain. So I'm not only talking about the times of crises here, I'm talking about the periods where we don't have crisis whatsoever. Still, you have to have the system up and running. And an example from Doğuş Automotive, we had a project called Drive. Actually, Doğuş Automotive has always focused on people and training. And on the side of retail, actually, we had suppliers, we had business partners, and training and preparation of the staff at retailers were also among our priorities, even when we weren't facing any crises whatsoever, because what we cared about was customer satisfaction, and only through customer satisfaction was it possible for us to be successful. And strategic areas, for example, human resources is quite important for us. And you need to focus on other aspects and whole aspects of the business. You need to do it during the times of crises as well. But one thing about the crises, some weak links in the chain are most severely impacted. And it may be because of the investments they make in other areas, etc. So you need to have a holistic look here. Well, that's great. This has been a holistic perspective, and this has been a uniting presentation. It is like we're not losing any participants here. It looks like all the participants are here, so they're quite excited. And one example for that is two valuable speakers. They represent their own companies here, own businesses here. They talk about the steps they've taken in their transformation. These companies represent different industries. One is Dardanel, well, in food industry, leading company. Funika Holding, vice president. So he will be talking about his own values. So Mehmet Onen will have the floor right now. He is the general manager at Dardanel, but at the same time, he is from the shareholding family of shareholders. Mehmet, you have the floor.
Haluk Hocam, öncelikle size ve EBRD'ye beni bu kadar...
First of all, I would like to thank you and thank EBRD for bringing me as a guest to such an important panel, among such important guests in this panel. Before I begin my presentation, I'd like to say the following. Şahin Bey is also my father-in-law, and even if he's so knowledgeable about strategy, the first lesson that he taught me was happy wife, happy life. And for that, I'd like to thank him as well. My name is Mehmet Onen. I studied in the US for high school and university. Then I started working in a company which is one of the top 3 tuna fish companies in the world, and it has vertical integration from the ship all the way to the brand. I worked in that company for a year as an analyst. Then I came back to Turkey, and can you hear me? Okay. Then I came back to Turkey, and in Turkey, first of all, I started working at the export sales and raw material procurement departments, and in the past 3 years, I've been the executive chairman of Dardanel. After coming back from the US, the company, within 5 years, as you said at the beginning, was reborn from the ashes. Many people think I made this transition possible, but actually credit should go to our founder and chairman of the board, my father, Niyazi Bey. Thanks to his efforts and his vision, this has been possible, and we're still learning from him, and we'll continue learning from him. Never, Winston Churchill says, never waste a good crisis. Myself as Mehmet Onen and as Dardanel, what do I understand, what do we understand from success? According to me, or according to us, success means reflecting your potential to life. And what brings out that potential is actually performance. And it reflects on life thanks to motivation. How is potential created? It demonstrates, it manifests itself under pressure. Under a controlled environment, you don't see high potential. And usually for success, you need to endure challenge and difficulties. We need to see these as a challenge to overcome. As Acar Baltaş, a writer, says, the potential turns into wealth, turns into ore under pressure, and then it becomes jewelry. Corporations and individuals every day repeat small actions, and that's how they spend the majority of their time, and we call this discipline. And discipline is actually coherency in principles, targets, or in performance criteria, coherence. So what did we do in the past 5 years? We did these small things, and we did them repeatedly in the best way possible. We endured difficulties and challenges and turned a good crisis into an opportunity. And when we did these, success stories came by themselves. And it's not a product that you launched or an advertisement or one agreement. Such things don't change your life permanently, but when such opportunities do occur, you need to be ready for them. We, as Dardanel, in the past 37 years, we were the leader in the market, and we made many innovations. We led many innovations, and the main reason for that was that we always pushed our boundaries and stepped out of our comfort zones. Our top motivation is to create employment, to carry brand name exports, invest into our country, and as we always say, and to always have fish in the meals of Turkish public. I have a very brief presentation to share with you.
Geldi mi?
Evet.
Can you see it?
Evet. 37 yılda biz Türkiye'de kişi başına düşen ton balığı tüketimine sıfır
We
gram
increased the per person tuna fish consumption from 0 to 210 grams. In Europe, per capita consumption is around 3.5 kilos, 2.5 kilos in the Middle East, 2 kilos in the US. But in Turkey, it's only 210 grams. Our target, our goal is to increase it to 1 kilos at least. Looking at the market, we have an advantage. We are 5 times the size of our closest competitor, according to a 2020 December research of Nielsen. Another important point here, this is the answer to being a brand name. Compared to our top competitor, our product is sold 40% at a higher price. In terms of production, as a producer, we produce out of every 100 can consumed in Turkey, 80 come out of our factories. We have special production for certain supermarket chains under their brand names. We noticed during this process that the UN Sustainable Development Goals we already practice, and we have already included them in our company values. One of them is innovation, industry, and infrastructure. Since 2019, we have continued investing, and within 2 years, our production was almost tripled. It used to be 45 tons per day, but now 120 tons per day, which makes us one of the top 10 producers in the world. By 2021, our sales from production is $200 million. And at Borsa Istanbul, we are a publicly listed company. 68% is with the family and the rest is publicly listed at Borsa Istanbul. According to today's values, our market cap is more than $200 million. What have we done recently? At the beginning of COVID, something that we have been working on for 3 years. This is a first in the world and it's recent in Europe. We have introduced the easy open lid. We have received feedback from our customers that the product was very hard to open, or sometimes there would be spills as you were trying to open the can, but we found the solution. How did we find the solution? With our business partners, with our suppliers. In this project, we worked with Sartan. They gave us great support.
Haluk Hocam bahsettiniz. Biz de tedarikçi olarak
We talked about suppliers before. Yes, we don't see suppliers as only our suppliers, but we rather see them as our partners. And we owe our existence, our company's existence, to such suppliers as well as our customers. And in addition to that, we have introduced a first in Turkey, modified atmosphere packaging technology, which has a shelf life of 14 days. A new category, sandwiches. Innovation, yes, these things are talked about, but this is in the DNA of our company. We just because we did not enter any industry just because there were good profit margins in that industry, and we never will. The sandwich business is an entirely new category. It's very big in the abroad and in the UK, for instance, and in Turkey, this is one of our fastest growing business lines. We continue innovating. For instance, we offer a Turkish fish with olive oil, Turkish sardines with olive oil, cold squeeze olive oil to customers. Then tuna salad, ready to eat. Protein and carbohydrates are offered together as a ready meal, and this is a rapidly growing product whose sales is increasing. Another important cause for us is our gender parity. Among our 2,200 employees, 1,485 are women. We're proud of this because we operate out of Çanakkale, and we are offering employment to 1,400 women. This is also adding a social value to our community. For instance, let's imagine 4 people per each family, which means we are tapping the lives of 5,000 households through these employees. Again, one of UNDP's sustainability points is good health and good aging well. And we're lucky here because our product is pure, entirely natural. 100% of tuna fish comes from the oceans, and we bring this to our customers, and doing so, we offer solution in terms of aging well and good health. But during the COVID, when it comes to canned tuna, we have been discussing health and omega-3 and protein for 10 years, but only with the COVID people have started thinking about their diet habits or their immune system. For instance, according to publications in the US, or for instance in Dr. Session's publication, for a well diet does not only prevent certain diseases, but actually can reverse certain existing diseases. So as Socrates said, let the food be the medicine. So when it comes to this, actually, we're lucky in terms of the business that we operate. Then when it comes to life below water and sustainable fishing, as you can see on the left hand side, we started in 2017 to question your fish. This is very new in the world. Every can has a certain code, an alphanumerical code, which you can enter on our website, and this will tell you which ocean the fish comes from, and there are more than 1,000 species, which species of tuna and which ship, and using what kind of method. Maybe 3 years ago, this was not that important, but today, this is extremely important for our customers. This gives great trust, and it gives you the story of the fish that you're enjoying. We've increased our sustainability in terms of sustainability and trade, actually. So what did we do during COVID? Some of these we had already initiated before because they linked to our core values already. For instance, we have increased our production capacity. We have increased our employment by 500 additional staff. Again, a very important document, the TSC COVID document. We received it very quickly, and we made the decision to do so very quickly. And during this process, we did not only obtain this document, but we also employee engagement and happiness is very important to us. I mean, it's important to all companies, but with support from a dietitian, we took certain measures to increase the immunities of our employees. We changed our menus. We have changed the ratios of protein or carbohydrates. We've made an increase, a pay increase for our employees. We have increased their benefits. We have made our prices fixed. During COVID, maybe you'd remember, certain companies or certain wholesalers tried to use it as an opportunity to increase their prices. But what did we do? We took responsibility and we kept our prices the same. And from March to December, we did not increase the price of the end product. When it comes to sales channels, we have had some changes in each rate. We have strengthened our cooperation. For instance, Getir currently is one of the top 5 customers of Dardanel. When we first started in the year 2018, Getir or Migros or Banabi, we work with all such platforms, but we work with Getir like a partner. We are partners, and the other party feels the same as well. And we see how this reflects on our business. For instance, in 3 years, Getir has become one of our top customers. And this helps us. For instance, during COVID, certain customers did not go to supermarket, but they preferred digital shopping, home delivery shopping, but we were prepared for this. Maybe if we had done this after March of 2020, we'd be too late and we wouldn't see the results that we're currently seeing. But thanks around the level values that I mentioned, we have already done this and seen results. We supported our suppliers, which is also very important. Companies delayed their payments, but we did the opposite. We have improved the payment conditions for our suppliers in order to show them that we are with them and we support them. Of course, our industry, or in the tuna fish industry, is carried out in the oceans by ships because in entry and exit of the ships, a PCR test is carried out. So we know that in our supply chain, there won't be any delays because of COVID, because tests are carried out regularly. So there is no setback or disruption. But this was a positive outcome of seeing our suppliers as our business partners. Again, we talk about digitalization. When it comes to digitalization, nobody, talking about Dardanel employees, we did not know what Teams was or how to establish Teams, but very rapidly, in only one day, we were able to hold all of our meetings home, and we did not have any delays in our decision-making processes. We have taken decisions very quickly. In March, there was an increase with the panic. There was an increase in buying foods, and we made a decision very quickly, and we said we would postpone our exports, but we would rather try to help the domestic market, because we have a different cause here. Our cause is to enable the access of Turkish people to protein, to pure protein through food. We made this decision and we put it to practice very quickly.
Şahin Bey de bundan bahsetti. ürün ile
As Şahin Bey also talked about, you can offer certain value with a product. We may have an easy open lid, or we can have a higher quality product, but outside that as well, we must have a community benefit. We have a social entrepreneurship program which we initiate this year. It is about the no hunger part of UNDP. Of course, for children who don't have access to food or protein, the government is also running many projects, but not just for Dardanel, but for food companies which produce in different parts of Turkey have to also get involved and do something. For Anatolian students to access protein, we are going to initiate a project this year in order to shoulder some responsibility. It's not going to be just planting a couple trees to help the nature. Part of it will be financed by the brand and part by the consumer, and we'll be offering Dardanel products to the children in different parts of Anatolia, and the amount of products delivered to them will be broadcast and reported through our website in a very simple way, and consumers will be able to see how much goes where in a very transparent and clear way. And such values, again, my personal opinion, if we notice these and we notice the significance of employment, and if we try to practice these principles in our companies, we can see the outcomes of these more solidly once we're out of the COVID crisis. And I'm sure that we will get companies who do so will get returns as a positive value for their businesses.
benim Haluk Hocam benim tarafım bu kadar.
This is all from my side. Thank you very much. Thank you. This has been a very complimentary and supporting presentation. I have taken some notes. First of all, you step out of your comfort zone. You are very active in branding. You strengthened your supply chain. You entered new areas like sandwiches. You were very brave despite the COVID, for instance. You diversified your products, and maybe most importantly for future generations and future of the world, you have certain social contributions as a company and as a group. For instance, starting with women's employment, or emphasizing good diet practices. Also, when it comes to the crisis, quick decisions and being flexible. Many universities like Harvard, Stanford, or research organizations always emphasize this, being flexible, making decisions quickly, because crises come and go. You have touched on all of those. There is one point that I'd like to add. For instance, in the past 5 years, in terms of tons, we grew by 40% in the past 5 years. For instance, in 2020, only our order delivery was 80%. 20% of the orders we could not deliver. The capacity is very important. We're making investment into increasing our capacity. We couldn't fulfill 20% of the orders, so it's important for companies to foresee the demand and act accordingly, prepare accordingly. I think you have a question. That's a question that came from the participants. Yes. Yes, we had a crisis on social media, which was a good learning opportunity for us, which brings us to what Churchill said, never waste a good crisis. What happened there is 99% of our production is automated. Someone shot a footage of our packaging. It was by a group who came there for shooting an advertisement video for us, and then it started circulating on the internet. People ask, why is there no automation? That's boutique production. As you know, until you reach a certain volume, it's not feasible to carry out automation investment there. But even if it's the 1% of our production, the lesson that we learned from there is that that product, that bag product, we already had brought the machine for that packaging to carry out packaging automatically rather than manually, but it wasn't in line with our specs, and because of the COVID, we couldn't commission the engine, the machine. It was the only part of the factory that was not automated. You can say, yes, I have a machine already, the machine is working, but when it comes to values, we cannot accept that in part of our codes or our values. We said very clearly that this is a boutique product which is manually packaged rather than automatically. Secondly, there was a topic there. There was contact with the hand of the worker. In the can technology, in order to have a 3-year lifespan, there's sterilization at 121 degrees, cooking with high degree. According to FDA or GMD rules, there is no risk. It's a transaction carried out with the bare hands. In McDonald's restaurants, for instance, McDonald's doesn't use the plastic glove either, because when people wear plastic gloves, they think it's hygienic and they keep touching everything and they forget washing their hands. But the opposite, when in our specific case, for instance, that plastic glove could be torn and material could enter the product, that's a higher risk. And we have carried out, we're planning on communication on saying that this should be carried out with the bare hand. Another important question, we received feedback about pickled. A pickled means we cannot put solid salt into our products. In order to have a uniform distribution, we need to mix salt with water. That's how we explain it. But we agree that, and we pay for it, and we should draw a lesson from the fact that, yes, this very quickly, even if it's a small peanut of our production, we have to carry out that change as quickly as possible, and we're going to do that. But my personal, or as a brand, our opinion is that during such times of crisis, you need to keep calm, and for so many years, the Dardanel brand gave the perception of support, trust and reliability to the customer. We should not compromise on that, and we need to continue working for that goal. That's great. This also shows us the significance of communication. And the question was about how to approach a crisis situation. And maybe through communication, you can relay your information and tell them what the facts are, scientific facts are. Dardanel, yes, as we were setting this title, it's a very fitting title. Very difficult times. You came from very difficult times to where you are today. For instance, in 1 year, the share value increased by 10%, 10 times, and we work together, and I had an opportunity to observe it. 15 times, I'm sorry, not 10 times, even 15 times. If we had invested into Dardanel, none of us would be here. We would be having a vacation at the moment in Hawaii. So when it comes to corporate governance, what is the most challenging in the transition period? What was the most challenging for you, and how were you able to overcome? I would like to hear about your perspective. We have only 2 minutes left. As I said at the beginning, a challenge. I cannot give you one major factor, one thing that we had a lot of difficulty in overcoming. No such specific example as I was involved in the operations personally. It comes back to what I said before. Small things, small steps, but repeating them every day. And not diverging from your values. I think that's the hardest part. In order to claim something, you sometimes have to pay the price first. For instance, even during our most difficult times, for instance, we never changed the quality of our products. Even if our costs went up, we did not disrupt the quality of our product, which means we paid a price, but in order to cut costs, many food companies decrease the size of the package. Maybe the end user doesn't even notice that, but for us, quality is our constitution. We also wrote it into our family constitution that we worked on together. We never gave up on quality, and this was an important reason that we were able to see these times, the levels. Thank you very much for your contribution. Now, again, in the top category, we are going to listen to another important story, the highest capacity textile dyeing company, a textile company, but it's not all. A company that invests in technology as well, Funika Holding. We're going to listen to the story from the person himself. Welcome, Civan, and the floor is yours.
Teşekkür ederim. Öncelikle hem size Haluk Hocam hem de EBRD'e çok teşekkürler. Böyle bir ortam ve çalıştığı için. Diğer sizi ve diğer konuşmacıları dinlerken açıkçası
Thank you very much for this workshop. As I was hearing other speakers, I've learned a lot. Well, I'm a young business person, and this is why it's been quite valuable for me to be hearing from you. And I have a presentation.
Evet, gözüküyor sanırım.
Evet.
I think you can see my presentation.
Bugünkü sizlerle paylaşmak istediğim sunumumun adı aile şirketimiz Funika Holding'de gerçekleştirdiğim.
My presentation is about the successful transformation in Funika Holding, a family-owned business. And this is going to be a story that only 1% of businesses can achieve. This transformation, how we achieve this transformation, I'll talk about that. Let's have a look back at 2010. Back then, Funika Holding was basically facing a suspicion of bankruptcy. Its debts were definitely higher than its assets. It had a negative operating capital, and my father had passed away, the founder of the company. Right after my father's passing, our family gathered again for the transfer of shares and etc. We started to take action rapidly. We were in our early 20s. I was 21, and our experience in business was quite limited. And again, back in 2010,
almak üzere
We
faydalan.
had discussions with experienced business people to hear from their insights. Özilhan or Aclan, Acar were with us during our discussions. We wanted to hear from them. We wanted to learn from them. It was quite important to hear their opinion on our own transformation. And today we have positive cash flow and we have a growing operating capital. And in 2014, we concluded the suspension of bankruptcy, and we are among the numbered companies in Turkey in this field. As we were repaying all our loans, we didn't get any mutual funds. We used our own sources, own resources, and we tapped into our own operations to repay our loans. And now we have sustainable business and we project a positive cash flow in the periods to come. Well, this has been a general outlook, and I've talked about 2 different years, 2010 and 2020. But before that, I'll talk about a memory of mine dating back to 2008. I was a student at Harvard. I was taking innovation classes, and back then, Funika had initiated R&D activities. We had innovative products, menopause pajamas, for example, or
Bunların ticaretleşme süreciyle ilgili.
couples rope, for example, for couples. So important decisions were being made by the textiles department. And my father wanted me to ask certain questions to my professors. When I asked my professor the questions, independence, it depends, pardon me, it depends was the answer that my professor gave to me. I think it had a defining role in my life, this phrase of it depends, because it always depended on the condition, on the situation. And as we see today, every leader, every executive will have a specific way of recovering a company, recovering a business. And I'll talk about my own experience in the company. In 2010, we took over the company and we carried out a SWOT analysis. And we found out our weaknesses and strengths in the face of opportunities and threats. My father had passed away and we had to take over the company at quite an early age, and we carried out this analysis together with employees. Sun Tzu, you probably know him, a Chinese warrior in history. Rather than improving your weaknesses, you need to further strengthen your strengths, he said. And this is why we focused on our key strengths and we invested in these areas. And our weaknesses, areas where we were losing, areas where we didn't make any profits, we dropped them and we left them aside. Rather than increasing the turnover, we narrowed the turnover and we focused on profitability and efficiency. This was the business model for us to repay our loans and debts. And in the meantime, we focused on certain values. The first is human. The first was people. I believe that we are a huge family. Employees included our CEO, employees, and executives all have a shared dream. They have delivered great efforts, and had it not been for their efforts, we wouldn't have been successful. I'd like to thank them here once again. Teamwork is key here. Well, imagine a toothpick. It's easy to break it, but once you bring together 10 toothpicks, it's really difficult to break them. So when you're a good team, many hurdles you wouldn't normally overcome, you can overcome them. This is what we've experienced at the company. And whatever we do, And regardless of the area where we're investing in, a human factor and teamwork play a significant role. This is what we observe in our own business. The other significant value for us is time and time management. We always race against time, especially while we were repaying our debts. And we basically came up with a specific sequence, and had it not been for a good timing, we wouldn't have been able to pay our debts. And time is something that you can't recover. It is a significant cost item, especially in industry, communication, production, everything actually relies on time. You can be effective only when you handle time properly. In our textile company and in our textile plant, we use the water we use in faint colors, in dark colors. This is how we basically save time that we would otherwise spend in heating the same amount of water. So as we use the water, again, we save significant time. We at the same time see improved efficiency in production. So time is something that you need to manage very well. Money and cash flow, there are important values as well. Well, this is something that all the other speakers today have mentioned. A good cash flow plan is important. It is something that helps you understand the possible problems in the future proactively. We've formulated cash flow plans for 5 years, and this is how we basically allocated our financial sources. And family was also an asset for us. The unity and solidarity within the family was quite important. After my father's passing, the first thing we did was to adopt a single office. And since 2010, we've all been working in the same room, in the same office. We have faster decision-making processes, we have stronger communication, and everything is quite transparent thanks to this.
Ben aynı zamanda Tayder Aile İşletmeleri Derneği'nde de yönetim kurulu üyesiyim.
I am also on the board of the Association for Family-Owned Businesses. I've seen a colleague among the participants, by the way, and our motto at Tayder is unity in the family and sustainability in the business. I believe that managing the family is quite important. And you've basically shared quite important information. Well, if one is missing, you can't really manage your resources properly. And you find it difficult to manage resources and time as well. In the past decade, we've focused on the importance of internal balance. Because when you're faced with fear, stress, and concerns, even if the best opportunity is standing in front of you, you won't see it, and you want to make good decisions. This is why we need to remain calm. We need to make sure that we have the energy to tackle certain things. Yes, internal balance is important, and this is something we've experienced during COVID-19. And what we did during the pandemic, we basically moved many business processes to online platforms. I mean, the businesses we could, the processes that we could migrate to online platforms. We also have had investments in the States. There is a platform, for example, Coursera. We're among the investors of that. We have invested in certain fintechs. We've invested in Naco Pizza. Well, restaurants remained closed during the pandemic. Well, services industry was hardly hit during the pandemic, but we made investments in a frozen pizza company, and it basically concluded the year with growth. So this is a company where we invested in. During the pandemic, we also partnered with Party Republic, and with national and international companies, we have certain data analytics activities. Yes, we have certain business processes on online platforms, and we've invested into various areas during the pandemic. Yes, life is full of surprises, and you don't know what awaits you. You can't always anticipate, but the future will unfold. And I would never think that I would accept a loan of 35 million USD when I was back at university. But during the past decade, we understood the value and unity of family, and we were always hopeful. We never lost hope. And there is one thing that we believe in. Whatever we live, whatever we experience, they're there for us to improve ourselves. Rather than reacting against it, we need to appreciate them. This is how we progress. Thank you very much for your attention. Well, this has been a very, very positive conclusion. And thank you very much for your genuine remarks, Civan. The main theme that you've had basically was tapping into crises and making use of them as opportunities. And as a result of the crises that we've faced recently, family-owned businesses are more inclined to tackle crises properly. And family businesses don't have to remain within the 5% of businesses who can't survive. So, okay, we're going to wrap up. Our aim was to finish on time. We've had 2 questions, by the way, and we didn't have the chance to address them. One is as follows. Well, 95% of businesses in Turkey are family-owned businesses. So looking at all the presentations, what about the criteria for being a family-owned business? This is one of the questions. Okay, we have a clear answer to it. It doesn't really matter where you look at it from. If a company, well, it doesn't really matter what its size is. If a family has their own will and eagerness on a company, then it's a family-owned company. Well, maybe 2 family members should be actively employed at the company, etc., etc. There are certain criteria to it, but it doesn't really matter if 70% of your shares are traded on the stock exchange. But if there is a family or even a member within the family who has the authority to appoint a board member, they are a family-owned business. This is why large or giant companies in the States are known as family-owned businesses. This is the case for Turkey as well. So all the things that we've talked about today are important, and they're quite pertinent for family-owned businesses. Well, right formation of the boards and being independent, etc. These were the topics that we've touched upon. I don't know if other participants would like to take the floor to provide their opinion on this. The second question is about passive family members and how to basically comfort them. Let's say maybe we should go to a spa together. Well, passive family members, what we mean by that is basically we should have a look at it from the family perspective. If you may have the constitution for the company, but if family members are shareholders, well, assuming that they are shareholders, they have certain shareholder rights. And How do you implement them? This question is quite important. Yes, shareholders, there may be passive shareholders, and how they act. This is quite important as well. So independent and reliable, independent and neutral, well, of course, family members will be involved here, but I'm talking about the execution of the company itself, and interests of the business should be observed here. A board that observes all these things is quite important. This will have a big impact on the passive shareholders' opinion on the execution of the company. Well, there are many methods to gather the family, just as Civan and Mehmet mentioned. There are various steps that can be taken to strengthen the bond within the family, mechanisms we have. Well, this is another aspect that we look into. And having said that, I would like to thank EBRD once again and all the other participants. I'm grateful for this great webinar, and I'll give the concluding remarks to EBRD. EBRD Turkey Food Industry Business, Wolcek Boniachuk. I hope I pronounced it properly, but I'll give the floor to him for his concluding remarks.
Thank you very much. I think Civan Bey made my speech even shorter, as he touched upon all the various important points about family businesses. For family businesses are unique as they combine often multi-generational business experience, as well as they provide for the basic social unit, the family. For that reason, they are the core of Turkish economy for delivering growth, stability, and continuity in the country. I'd like to repeat one word, which I think is very important: continuity. Coming from Eastern Europe myself, which was subject to huge political and economic changes over the last 100 years, there are almost no companies that have continuing ownership for a period probably longer than 20 years now. All of them were nationalized at some point. All of them were destroyed. They disappeared. So when I came to Turkey for the first time and started meeting people who have been in business, whose families been in business for 70, 80, 100 or more years, I was very impressed by the knowledge, by the experience, and I realized what this experience and this culture really, what it means for both for Turkish economy, but also obviously for those companies. So it is also very essential that that those family businesses are able to adapt and survive in a changing environment. And we all know very well that the world outside is changing quite dramatically. The changes appear to be rapid and fundamental, and pandemic is just sort of an icing on top of the cake. Even without pandemic, there are huge changes happening in the world, both in Turkey, but also outside. So we hope that this workshop helps to consider for various companies how to respond to those changes. I will stop right there because I think we've run over the three hour mark already. But I would like to thank very much to all the panelists, to Haluk Bey for running the show, and of course to Burcu from our team, Burcu Hanim, for organizing this workshop. Thank you very much.
I thank you sincerely for your kind words and for wrapping up in a very succinct way. So now, first of all, also thanks to all our participants who supported us. And we hope that this really made some changes in your thinking or perhaps contributed to your thoughts. In final, we have a short survey again regarding the value added of this event for you. This can also help both us and EBRD for future events, hopefully. Lütfen şimdi son anketimizi kusura bakmayın, İngilizce kaptırıp gittik.
Sorry for speaking in English, says the speaker. Well, if you can support us by replying the questions in the questionnaire, we'll be grateful. Well, the answers will be anonymous, so you can be merciless here. We have 3 questions.
Güzel, samimi cevaplar geliyor inşallah.
Hopefully, we're receiving good answers here. You can say no. And apologies for any mistakes that we may have made. I hope this has been a good use of your time, and we would like to thank each and every one of you. Well, hopefully, we'll see you soon in other organizations. Have a great evening. Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Mr. Haluk. Good evening. Thank you very much.